This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board Operating Support Grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and a grant from the Wells Fargo Foundation, Minnesota.
Hi, I'm harpist Bridget Kibbey, and welcome to the Schubert Club Music Museum Mini. I am so pleased to introduce you to one of the best instruments ever created. In fact, I should say evolved over millennia of instruments all over the world. You see, the harp existed in time and place in many iterations around the world before it became the concert harp you see today. You had kora from Mali, you had the Celtic clarsack, you have the oud, the Turkish kanun coming from Central Asia. You have the lyre in ancient Israel, Egypt, and Greece. And over time, these instruments made their way west and into Europe to become the concert harp in the late 1800s. Now, one of the first composers that I love to write for this instrument was Claude Debussy. This is his Danse Sacrée for harp and strings. Today we'll play it solo so you can hear the harp part alone. It's no surprise that the concert harp, and especially the French masters like Debussy and Ravel, inspired many composers after them to write for this magical instrument because they really understood the color of this instrument and the capabilities of what it can create in timbre, articulation, and really just a romantic nature of it. But they weren't the first ones to write for the harp. Handel actually wrote one of the first concerti that was ever noted in music history in one of his oratorios. This is the Handel concerto for the harp in B-flat major. Now, the thing I love about playing the harp is that I have direct control over the strings with my fingertips, direct contact with the instrument. There's nothing between me and the harp. That is so satisfying. For example, I put my finger on the string, I curve it in, and depending how I strike or struck or pluck, the string, I can create different emotions on the instrument. And the motion we make is kind of like kneading dough if you've ever made bread. I've never made bread, to be honest with you. So we use 4 fingers on each of our hands to play the harp. In fact, our pinkies are too short, sadly. I don't care how big your hands are. As a harpist, no one uses their pinkies that I've heard of yet. If you know about something, write me. So you'll notice that we have color coding strings on the harp, and that is to tell us where we are. If these were all white, I would be completely confused. But thankfully, we have these color coding on the strings. The C strings are red, the black strings are Fs. In fact, the strings are laid out as kind of a C major scale. Listen. Kind of like the white keys of a piano. But where do we get our sharps and flats? That's where things get interesting. If you notice at the top of the harp, you'll see these little levers that are connected in a sense to the instrument, but also press into the string. I'm going to play the C string here, which is red. Take a look. Any guesses what's happening here? That's right. These little levers are digging into the string to shorten them by a half step. Isn't that an amazing mechanism that came about in the late 1800s and hasn't changed since because it's so perfect? So basically, we have connected to these levers. They go to the top of the column and connect to a pedal rod. What am I talking about with pedals? Oh, well, I'll show you. The rod comes down to the base of the harp and connects to these pedals. We have a pedal that is according to each note of the scale. We have a C pedal, D pedal, E pedal, F, G, A, B, etc. And this C pedal that I'm moving, just like I did before, I notch it into flat, natural, or sharp to manipulate all the C's on the harp. So even though we have 47 strings, we actually have times 3 that amount of pitches to make because each string can make a sharp, natural, or flat. You know, the harp takes on a lot of different roles throughout music history. It's often the choice of instrument for the bard who's trying to woo his lover, or perhaps the instrument that helps a nation to grieve or mourn, like ancient Israel or Celtic culture. But it's evolved and it's become a staple in the orchestra. You might hear some incredible solos like the Waltz of the Flowers that we started with in the back of the orchestra, but you might also see the harp right up front as a concerto soloist like you heard in the Handel or the Debussy. But I love it as a solo instrument in the salon, in the small concert hall, where audiences can feel the very unique resonance of this instrument surrounding them like a hug. Here's a transcription of a piano piece that I love that I've made for the harp. It's Albeni's Majorca. Is it any wonder that this instrument has been the prized collaborator with vocalists, king's courts, to the songs of the people for millennia? It has a special sound, doesn't it? I think the sonic range and color potential of this instrument is so special. It continues to inspire composers today to write new repertoire for this fascinating and ancient instrument. Although we have the concert harp today, just remember, the instrument exists in many iterations around the world. Like I mentioned, you have the African kora, the Chinese zither, you have the Turkish kanun, you have the ancient lyre that came from basically Greece, Egypt, ancient Israel, and then of course you have the Celtic clarisac, and you even have the Genera tradition, which exists now in South America and has its completely new repertoire. So it's really exciting for us all to explore what this instrument can do. And to help you with that, I would encourage you to go to the Schubert Club Music Museum to see for yourself the harp up close and personal, as well as an amazing collection of instruments from around the world throughout history.